What's up, everybody? I hope you're doing well. Welcome to the extended cut, minimally edited podcast version of this week's episode, where we're going to take a closer look at something that I wish therapists talked about more. And that's what to do if we're seeing therapy clients when we're not okay ourselves. There are just some topics that I feel like need to be talked about and kind of just aren't. Like, I did a Google search for being a therapist when you're not okay, being a therapist when you're struggling with your own mental health, whatever variation of Google search you can think of for like, what should a therapist do when they're not doing well? And it's actually not that easy to find information about this. But given that as therapists, we are just as human as the clients that we work with and therefore deal with the same array of mental health related concerns as they do, the question remains, what do we do when we're the ones who are not okay? Because it definitely happens. It definitely happens. But then when it does, it seems like you only hear about it in like hush hush corners of like really trusted consult groups or like your therapist bestie. But I've interacted with enough therapists at this point to conclusively say that this happens to everybody at least sometimes, if not a lot of the times for us, where we're showing up to work to see our therapy clients and we're arriving feeling like, I'm not okay today. I might not be okay in general. Now, as is true with pretty much anything I ever talk about on this channel, really, I am not a definitive expert on what to do if you're struggling with your mental health as a therapist, if you're feeling not okay, but I can talk about it. I can shed some light on this experience. So if you are listening or watching to this episode because maybe you're feeling like you're not so okay right now, just know you're not alone. It's okay to not be okay. I know that's some cliche coined somewhere, but it's true. And I sure hope that there are some spaces you can find where it's okay to talk about it and get some support. But with all of that said, let's talk a little bit more about what the nuances are when we're feeling not okay and yet we're still doing our best to show up for our therapy clients. Now, I know there's some pieces that do get talked about in the rare instances where people do talk about therapist mental well-being that, of course, you can always seek professional services and supervision. I'm sorry, I'm kind of doing it in this sort of silly voice because I've heard that said so many times, but it is true. Seek professional help as needed, and it's always okay to take time off as well. So checking in to see, like, am I actually okay enough to see my clients today? But there's definitely more to this conversation than just like, yeah, of course, seeing our own therapist can be really helpful, and it's always more than okay to take a mental health sick day or like a sabbatical if you need one. But what if you're not okay still and not okay for a prolonged period of time? Because for most of us, at least ideally, we're not taking mental health sick days, 6 months out of the year, for example. There might be more nuance to this conversation. So I want to just talk about some of the things that I've seen, whether in my own experiences of times when I've felt not okay, because yes, I am a person and there have been many times where I have also felt not okay and still seen therapy clients. And also things I've witnessed it in different therapist circles that I've run in and just sort of some general things that can come up, ways people can approach these situations, and potential tips for like how to take care of yourself well in the midst of these things. I'm using that phrasing really loosely. Being not okay could take many forms. So that's kind of on purpose. Not okay could mean I'm dealing with a severe mental health diagnosis. It could mean I'm grieving the loss of an important loved one, or it could be something else. Maybe we're dealing with something with our physical health that makes it really difficult to focus, or, there could be an array of different things that could make us feel like I'm not okay. One that I'm feeling right now is the current political climate. Anyone else? I mean, I know some people are happy right now, but I am also allowed to be deeply unsettled. And in this extended version of the episode, I will also include some moments, stories, experiences when I felt like I wasn't okay in my therapist journey and I still was seeing therapy clients and just kind of sharing anecdotally what I did in some of those situations. Before we get into the different iterations of still seeing therapy clients when we're feeling like we're not okay, I'd like to spend a moment on like how I go about determining if I'm going to cancel a day of sessions or not, or even just a single session. I used to get so hung up on this, like unless I had like a fever or was clearly physically ill, I felt like I needed to always see all my clients, always. And mental well-being is part of our well-being as well. So yes, if you have a fever, please do cancel your sessions and take care of yourself. But also there are some ways to assess to see like, how is my mental well-being and how might this affect my clients today? So here are the 3 questions that I like to run through to just help calm my system when I'm considering canceling a day of sessions, when I'm like mentally not feeling okay. The first question I like to ask is like, how am I affected right now? And how would it affect me to still see my clients, or maybe it's specific clients in particular? Then I like to ask, how would this affect my clients, or it might be specific clients in particular? And then how might it affect our therapy work? To me, that set of questions is already more nuanced than the sort of blanket feedback that we get telling us that, you know, if what we're going through is affecting our therapy work, then we should refer out or cancel for that day, that sort of thing, which is true, but it doesn't really help us get to answering that question of like, does this affect my therapy work? How much does it affect my therapy? How much is it acceptable to affect my therapy and how much is really unacceptable? Where's the line? It's not so simple. Like, yeah, if you were up all night last night because you were taking care of your sick child, you might show up to work and be sleep deprived. And is it going to affect your therapy work? I guarantee it. I guarantee it. Does that mean you need to cancel all of your therapy sessions? It depends. Somebody might say, well, how does this affect me? I'm feeling a little sleepy. I'm feeling groggy. There's a little bit of a fogginess, so I'm not like quite on point on my mental A game as I usually am, but I can empathize. I can remember where I left off with my client. I'm not likely to fall asleep in the session. And so I think generally I can hold my own therapeutic frame in the session and support my client. How might this affect my client? They might see the bags under my eyes. I might yawn a couple times in session, you know, so that I won't follow this through all the way to the end, but you could imagine somebody having to stay up all night, feeling super not with it the next day, and still opting to see their therapy clients once they run through these 3 questions. So those are 3 questions that I like to run through, whether it's a physical ailment or a mental well-being checkup or anything else really, to just help me kind of calm the part of me that says like, I must see every therapy client no matter what, or the pendulum could swing the other way and like, I mustn't see any therapy clients if I'm going through anything that might affect our therapy work, because humans are dynamic. Like everything we're going through every single day affects our therapy work. Like even things like clients that I see at 2 p.m. are going to get a slightly groggier version of Marie than the clients I see at 9 a.m. Always 100% of the time, because 9 a.m. Marie is way more on her A game than 2 p.m. Marie, who kind of wants to take a nap. Okay, there's definitely other nuanced ethical type questions to take into consideration when we're talking about like, do I cancel just for today or this session or not? But in this episode, I also want to zoom out to more general experiences of just not feeling okay, not doing well, or being really burdened with whatever it is that you're carrying right now. It's not just, oh, I need to take a mental health day, wink, wink, hashtag self-care. It's like, hey, I'm really not doing well. It's been going on for a long time. So if you were going to cancel, we would be talking about canceling for weeks or months or even longer. When I was getting ready to film this episode, there was a specific season that came to mind for me in my personal history of a time when I was really not doing well that happened to also overlap with, seeing therapy clients in private practice. And that season lasted for at least a year and a half. I mean, the worst of it was for a year and a half. And of course, it's not like, and then, one day you wake up and it's over. So it definitely kind of blended out into time after that beyond a year and a half. But in that year and a half in particular, there was a long list of things I was going through. I won't even share some of them because they feel so personal, but two of the things that I was going through were, one, I was in the process of like putting the pieces together of just how damaging my relationship was with my parents, and making the decision eventually to end my relationship with my parents, which definitely, if you ever set a boundary with a narcissistic parent, you will see a lot. So there was also the aftermath of like figuring out, like, do I need to file a restraining order? Do I need to be concerned about stalking? My mom contacting my bosses, making vague threats. So it was pretty epic, just setting some gentle boundaries early on. So I needed to keep escalating the boundaries in order to protect myself and my family, unfortunately. So that was a really difficult time. And the aftermath of me worrying that she was stalking me lasted for like 5 years. So that affected me a lot. In addition to that, at nearly the exact same time in my timeline, I was on staff working at a church at the time and discovering what I described at the moment as like I'm going through burnout, that now in retrospect, I can go back sort of post-mortem and realize I was seeing the tip of the iceberg of a very, 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 very harmful environment. I won't get into that because there is definitely legal action happening related to those things right now, pending in court. So no comment. But yeah, it affected me hard, big time. And that was happening at the exact same time that I was trying to figure out what was going on with my family, and a list of other things that are even more personal than that I'm not describing in this episode. So yeah, I was really not okay. When all of that was playing out, there was about a year and a half where I definitely met criteria for clinical depression. I was seeing a therapist weekly, doing what I could to try to take care of myself, quote unquote, doing all the right things as a therapist to, be able to be okay. But I was not okay. I was like a shell of myself for a good year and a half, like very dissociated. I would describe it as like my identity was getting fully stripped apart. Like every facet of my identity that you could evaluate was under evaluation, getting deconstructed and not yet reconstructed. So I was just like a blob floating in space. That was literally the phrase that I used. Like, I feel like I'm a blob floating in space because I felt like I didn't know who I was. I had trouble getting out of bed. We had just gotten a puppy, thank goodness, because if it wasn't for her begging to go potty and be fed, I don't know how long I would have stayed in bed, but I could have stayed in bed all day and just been a blob floating through space. So that was me for a year and a half, and that's not been characteristic of me before or since, but a year and a half is a really long time to just be like a shell of yourself. And I was seeing therapy clients that whole time. That was the same season that I had a full practice in San Francisco, and I was starting a new private practice in San Jose. I was trying to kind of migrate over. And so I was actually very busy seeing therapy clients in 2 cities with basically 2 practices. So I very much was seeing therapy clients when I was not okay. During that time, because especially I was in such an emotional fog in so much of my life, I was constantly checking in with my personal therapist, with my consult group, to see if they were seeing any flags that were living in my blind spots. So one way that I coped at that time was I just tried to seek advice and support, tried to disclose what was going on as much as possible so that hopefully if there was a blind spot, somebody else could help me catch any flags in there. I'm so grateful because I really had awesome supports then and now who were genuinely trying to sort of catch like, okay, if there's something sketchy in here, let's find it. Like genuinely like playing detective and trying to help me kind of whittle through what I was going through to see if it might be negatively affecting my clients. At the time, I was worried since I was going through so much of a fog, and that's why I kept reaching out for help. But when I was sitting with my clients, I just felt so grounded. I think it did help me personally, but I think also because I had something to anchor to, it was just, somebody else's story rather than my own floofy, foggy story that I was in. I could also re-enter this kind of grounded state. I think I know what I'm doing well enough, and not all the time because I'm human, but just as well as I typically would know. And so I think I am very equipped to still help my therapy clients in these moments because I'm not foggy in the therapy session. I'm just foggy in my own life. So that was a very helpful distinction for me to watch. And I was always checking in to see, does the fog creep into therapy sessions? And it did not, fortunately. Now I realized that was just one variation of how things could have played out. Like if I was getting foggy in the therapy sessions, I would have needed to do things pretty differently. So we're going to touch on some tools related to that in a minute. But that's my biggest memory of being not okay as a therapist while seeing therapy clients. There's some other stories where the other things started to creep in and affect the therapy work, and I had to make adjustments accordingly. So I'll share some of those stories in a bit. Aside from some of the ethical concerns that we've touched on of is this helpful to my clients for me to show up when I'm not doing well? There are additional concerns that I hear from folks. And the next loudest one that I hear is in the category of am I being a hypocrite or am I a fraud for showing up to help clients go through hard things when I'm going through a hard thing and I feel like maybe I'm not dealing with it very well? Isn't that off-brand poor marketing to say let me help you with your hard thing even though I can't help myself with my hard thing? I get it, especially the work that we do as therapists. It's hard to do a do as I say but not as I do approach to what we are doing in therapy. Here's my response to that. If you're feeling like a fraud, you're feeling like a hypocrite because maybe however it is that you may or may not be coping with what you're going through may not feel like the healthiest way, or you can't figure it out, air quotes, however you're speaking to yourself about it. Here's my response to that. By definition, a huge component of the therapy work lives in the relationship that a client develops with another human, with their therapist. And what I hear a lot in this misconception that a lot of therapists have of I'm a fraud for still treating therapy clients when I'm not doing well is that we can often tell ourselves that we should be able to figure our stuff out all by ourselves, whereas our therapy clients are needing the help of somebody else. But the reality is every human needs other humans in order to thrive. And maybe your therapy client has access to you, and maybe you are the help that they need to help them move through whatever they're needing to move through. But you may or may not have access to the type of help that you need to move through what you're going through. Or maybe you are already moving through what you're going through as well as you can with the tools that are available to you. Or even if you had an endless amount of tools available to you, humans to support you, you name it, it might still look like this. And this is you dealing with it as well as you can in the array of circumstances that are underway. So I think embedded in that, there is this question that is good for us to ask of is there anywhere where I would be helped by bringing another person or other people into what I'm going through that might be helpful, that maybe I missed or, haven't leaned into yet? But if you don't have access, or maybe you're already doing those things, then kind of check yourself to say am I telling myself that I need to have these things figured out all by myself or on a certain time frame? Yeah, I'm grieving right now, but it should only take X amount of time, and it's been taking a lot longer than that. We can kind of tell ourselves these things that we wouldn't say to our clients, but we expect things of ourselves that we wouldn't expect of our clients, which is a weird double standard, and I don't think makes any sense. For me, whenever I'm doing things that are in the category of I'm not practicing what I preach, I try to respond to that with a reframe within myself of saying Here's an instance where I am not practicing what I preach to my clients. I wonder what that says about what I'm going through right now or what I'm needing right now, that I am somehow living out my life in a way that doesn't align with what I preach. Because we're probably not just like being lazy or just like not caring. There's always a story, just like there's always a story for our clients. But before we continue this conversation, I'd like to take a moment to thank Powbox for sponsoring this episode. It wasn't until a couple years ago that I first learned that even with assigned BAA, Google Workspace and Microsoft 365 can't guarantee that 100% of the messages going in and out are HIPAA secure. So without a tool like Powbox operating on the back end, it's almost impossible to stay HIPAA secure unless you forego email altogether. Even if you exclusively use a secure portal to discuss protected health information with your clients, there's still going to be potential clients reaching out initially, and also some clients who will still try to email you because, I don't know, they forgot their password for their portal and they're trying to reach out. So with a tool like Powbox, you can guarantee that every single message is protected. Powbox is super easy to set up, and it's kind of a one and done situation. Like, you just spend a few minutes initially setting it up, and then it's just continuously quietly running in the background. Powbox offers a 14-day free trial to everybody, and they're offering a special discount to Private Practice Skills listeners. Just use coupon code SKILLS at checkout in order to receive $250 off your first year of Powbox. That's Powbox spelled Paubox. Thank you again to Powbox for sponsoring this episode. And now back to our conversation about what to do when you don't feel okay as a therapist. One tip that can be helpful sometimes, I think, is self-disclosing like a teensy bit. In some cases, just speaking from personal direct experience, there are times where we know something that we're going through is going to affect our therapy work, but it may still be totally okay to see our therapy clients if we add some sort of disclosure. So I'll share an example. Like, while I was pregnant, my therapy work was affected, for real. Now, I made a choice not to tell my clients on day one that I knew that I was pregnant, because I didn't want to then have to tell my clients just in case I lost that pregnancy for whatever reasons. So I waited until a while to share, which was difficult because there was a good 6 or 8 weeks in there that I knew I was pregnant and feeling terrible, and I hadn't told my clients yet. So I told some white lies to self-disclose. I would self-disclose that I wasn't feeling well. Did I need to run to the bathroom mid-session a time or 2 or 5 during that period? Yes. And I would just tell my clients that I wasn't feeling well. I know there are different things in our lives that can affect us longer than that. So if it's helpful to give some sort of self-disclosure that acknowledges that there's something that's affecting you, and if it affects your work at all, an invitation for your clients to let you know, but that you're still available to meet if you think you're well enough to. There's scenarios where I definitely just fully disclose what happened, like when I've had a loved one pass away or a pet pass away. I've let clients know that maybe I'm a little teary today because I lost a loved one or I lost a pet, and I'm still feeling well enough to meet. But if I'm seeming a little extra teary, it might be because of that. And everything's okay. I don't say it this way. I'll just say, everything's okay to my client. But what I mean by that is, I know I'm not doing okay in general, but I'm doing okay enough to be able to very much still attune to my client's needs, be here, listen, and continue our therapy work. But yeah, it might be a little teary, or might be a little, whatever it might be. Okay, here are a few more practical tools to utilize to help navigate these scenarios when you're not okay. One, I've heard therapists say that they're afraid that they will cry or break down in session in some form. And to that, I'll say, 1, it's totally okay to cry in session. And I think how to respond to this or what to do about it is more about, again, those 3 questions that I brought up at the beginning. How is this going to affect you? How is it going to affect your client? How is it going to affect your therapy work? If, for example, let's say you're grieving a loss and your client brings up their own loss that they're grieving, and you get maybe tearful, or you have a bit of a cry with your client, but you're able to still very much personally regroup, be okay enough as you're dealing with that loss. Your client is okay. You're not like sobbing for 30 minutes of your session, just losing it. But, maybe your client can experience this as like you're joining with them or you're empathizing, but still attuning to them, and that the therapy work can still continue. Then if you want to, you can still proceed with your client, perhaps with a little bit of a disclosure like we talked about before. Or if you feel like I'm going to break down and I'm going to be not okay, I'm going to kind of lose it, quote unquote, meaning like lose the frame of the therapeutic session where now you're needing to tend to yourself because you're really going through something, then I think if you can anticipate that that's likely going to happen, or there's a really good chance that's going to happen with therapy clients, I think that is a good time to consider taking some leave, getting some care for yourself while you recover, to take care of yourself. That's so important. And it's also, probably not going to benefit your client either. With that said, I have some nuanced thoughts to add in on this, like, should they take time off question that I don't often hear folks talk about, but I have definitely utilized myself. And sometimes we might simplify a problem like the one I just mentioned and say like, yeah, if you're really going to kind of lose the therapeutic frame, not be able to attune to your client because you need to attend to yourself, then you should cancel or take time off, which yes, but it could also be a good time to pivot. So for example, when I was going through that season for 1.5 years when I just really was not doing well, I was completely like discombobulated. It's like my identity spilled all over the floor and I had not picked up the pieces yet, and it was going to be a while. I started to pivot what types of clients that I took on. I used to be more okay with supporting folks through more acute crises. And during that season, in order to take care of myself and also in order to be able to support my clients well, I started taking on only clients with less crisis, less acute needs. Not because clients with more acute needs didn't need care, because that's not the case at all, but because in that moment I wasn't well equipped to support them, both for my own needs and their needs. So I was able to pivot to less severe cases. And that really helped me for a season of time where I was able to help them. It felt very grounding for me, but it wasn't disorienting for me at the time. And then over time, I was able to pivot again and then support clients going through very similar types of discombobulation, as a non-clinical word, that I was going through earlier in my journey, but I had passed through it and wasn't at risk of feeling like I was going to kind of fall apart anymore. And from an identity point of view, it had totally re-solidified in a new shape. So then I was able to, again, to re-engage with groups of people that I wouldn't have been able to for a while. It's always okay to consider a pivot. Like if you are a grief counselor, but then you are now suddenly going through your own grief, if it's most helpful to you and your clients to pivot away from doing grief work, totally understandable. So it could be a presenting issue pivot. It could also be like a therapy modality pivot. Like maybe you were working with couples, but then I don't know if your marriage fell apart and it's too difficult to work with couples now. Maybe you switch to individuals, or maybe you work with kids now. Sometimes a pivot like this can have a very similar impact as taking time off. And it's also okay to consider career pivots. Like, do you want to have your finances come from more than one space versus all of your finances coming from therapy work or one-on-one therapy work? Like maybe you do some groups and some one-on-one therapy work instead of just all one-on-one therapy work. There's different kinds of pivots that can sort of help us feel more okay in the work that we're doing. So please don't hear that as me recommending that like you shouldn't take time off because you can pivot. Not at all. If you need to take time off, take time off. I'm just also wanting to put out there that sometimes the only available option isn't just taking time off or leaving the profession altogether if it's kind of a more prolonged situation. It's okay to kind of brainstorm what your options are, even within the profession, just sort of pivoting into something a little different. Another concern that comes up for therapists sometimes is, when we realize that we're going through something that's big enough that it knocks us off of our A game as a therapist, where, we can still very much attune to our clients' needs, take care of them, offer them the support that they're needing, but we're not like on it to like the 11th degree, like maybe we typically would be, that then we can start to feel like we're offering subpar care, that we're like phoning it in. And so therefore, we're doing a disservice to our clients. And I used to feel that way as well. But the reality is, like, there are enough days that are at least slightly off my A game that if I canceled for every time I was slightly off my A game, in this phase of my life, as I get a little bit older, I would be canceling like more than 50% of my sessions. And at that point, you might start to question, like, is it more beneficial for your client to cancel 50% of your sessions, or is it more beneficial for you to still show up in your therapeutic frame, but just like slightly cracked, most of the time, 95, 98% of the time without canceling. And for me in this phase, I choose showing up. I used to be anxious about like trying to curate like so much health and well-being for myself so that I could be on my A game for my clients all the time. And then in 2018, I got pregnant with my first child, and that really threw me off my A game in so many ways. And then in 2019, I had a newborn. Oh my goodness, threw me off so much. Then in 2020, there was a pandemic. I got pregnant again. I had the second baby in 2021. I mean, I could go on and on. Like, my spouse was working in the front lines, so I had zero childcare during the pandemic, both from childcare and my partner, and I was still seeing therapy clients. Wow. And then pretty much immediately after I made it through all of like the postpartum hormonal ups and downs after my second child, I started perimenopause, which basically makes me feel like I'm pregnant half of the month. So I've basically been going through things that are throwing me off my A game continuously since 2018. And then there was that season where I was really not doing well in 2015, 2016. So in like the grand scheme of my entire therapy career since I've been licensed in 2014, most of it has been a blob where I am not performing as well as I did in those early years as a therapist. That was a really long-winded way of just saying that, like, you're going to have off days. And there's different reasons for why someone might have an off day. But at this point, like, rather than wallowing in the like, oh, I used to like just wake up chipper every day, ready to see my, I think I'm seeing 9 therapy clients a day, which there's no way I could do that today. And now I'm perimenopausal and often cranky and still sleep deprived, because turns out that happens even when your kids are like 4 and 6. So, and I don't feel like I'm not okay. It's just, I'm just not on my A game, and these aren't like askew, like I'm healthy. Like, these are the things your body is designed to go through, one might argue, and I'm still not on my A game. So, like, it is what it is. At some point between 2018 and now, I just resigned to accepting that this is what my best looks like now that I'm not 25 anymore. My clients are still helped. I think they are. I hope they are. 2 tips that I wish I had earlier in my career are, 1, whenever we have narratives in our mind about how we're supposed to show up in therapy, that can just compound on itself whenever we're not showing up in that way. So if we have some expectations about, maybe it's how much prep or how much extra reading we did on a particular presenting issue, let's say, or how attuned we're supposed to be every single instant of every single moment in therapy with our clients, or whatever the supposed to is that we have in mind, the moment that we are off that game, then we have this narrative kind of sometimes shouting at us, being like, hey, you're not meeting expectations. This is subpar therapy. And we can start to rehearse a very unhelpful narrative when perhaps it's possible we are still delivering very effective, successful therapy that our clients, if we could interview them, would say like, oh my gosh, no, you're doing an amazing job. This is so helpful. But our minds are telling us something different. So one tip that I wish I had, at least, and some of you might find helpful, is, ask yourself what those supposed to items are in your mind, and gently, like, call them into question. Can they be held as sort of a, like, when I'm having an amazing day and all the stars align, is it great to be able to meet this standard? Maybe that can remain true. But can my clients still find it incredibly helpful when I'm operating at like 70% of that? That may be true also. So I think my point in this is, like, we don't need to carry that extra narrative on top of everything else saying that, like, we're not meeting expectations, because that's going to wear on us and make us feel even less okay. And I'm pretty sure I had one more tip that I was going to share that just floated away. So we'll just blame perimenopause for that one. But that's kind of what I'm getting at, right? This, like, oh yeah, that last tip floated away. And oh well, I guess that was part of the 30% that disappeared when I'm operating at 70%, and hopefully it's okay. Obviously, this episode is not a definitive answer to, like, what to do in every situation where you might be feeling not okay as a therapist, but I largely just wanted to make this episode to put this conversation on the map. And my biggest hope from this episode, well, two biggest hopes from this episode are, one, that you feel like you are not alone and it's okay to not be okay. And two, that you feel encouraged to have this conversation in other spaces as well, hopefully in ones where it's safe to do so. But this is a conversation I think we should be having as therapists. We should assume that all of us have times where we're not okay. And at any given point, if you're in a consult group or you have coworkers or wherever you might be interacting with fellow therapists, like, at any given point, somebody is probably feeling not okay, whether they said it or not. So we don't need to, like, call people out on it, but let's just like, can we normalize it? Can we talk about it? Can we just be good therapists to ourselves and each other for it? Like, that would be awesome. So even though this episode might be all over the place, I'm pretty sure it was, hopefully we can at least start talking about this some more. Well, thanks for joining me in this episode. I'm always a little nervous when I don't script an episode that I'm just going to meander, and I sure did today. So I hope it was still helpful to you. If you have any tips that I didn't touch on for how somebody might be a therapist while feeling not okay, feel free to add them to the comments below. And until next time, from one therapist to another, I wish you well.